While some say Charles Martel's victory at the Battle of Tours was only a minor skirmish, in fact, Charles Martel's victory set a new course in medieval history, as it was extremely monumental and influential. So Charles Martel, his defeat of the Islamic invasion of France at the Battle of Tours and later, ensured that France would remain a part of Christendom. Secondly, Charles Martel ensured that the Franks would become the rulers of all of Gaul. And finally, Charles Martel became the founder of the Carlovingian dynasty. So, firstly, the Battle of Tours was very significant as it prevented France from falling into Arabic invaders' hands. So Charles Martel was a mayor, which actually had a lot of power in medieval Frankish times, as the kings really did nothing and really ceded their power to their aides, which were the mayors. And the mayors became powerful and rich. And so, with the Islamic invasion starting like 10 years before the actual Battle of Tours in 1721, the Arabs set up a capital at Narbonne after overrunning Spain. And the Arabs really used their heavy cavalry and trusted their heavy cavalry very much to overrun the mostly infantry forces of the Europeans. So the Battle of Tours really began with the Ode of Aquitaine, with his Arab superior, when his Arab superior revolted, and then Abdul Rahim crushed the revolt and defeated Odo at Bordeaux. Odo then called on Charles Martel for help, and then Charles granted him help after Odo submitted to Frankish authority. And then in 1732, only a little bit later after Odo asked Charles Martel for help, the Arabs advanced with Abdul Rahim at the head, and they attacked north of the river Loire and attacked with many raiding parties. The Arabs met Charles' much smaller force in the forest and waited for 6 days with the Arab forces outside in the field and Charles Martel's inside the woods. And they waited for 6 days as Charles wanted the Arabs and Abdul Rahim to enter the woods, while Abdul Rahim wanted Charles to go out of the woods, because then if Charles Martel came out of the woods, he could use his heavy cavalry to the best of his abilities. But on the 7th day, Abdul Rahim caved in and attacked with his cavalry in the woods. But this was a misplaced of trust, as the cavalry were not as effective or effective at all in the woods. And this was not the best strategic choice, but Edward Creasy says that, quote, the Muslims' best strategic choice would have been to simply decline battle, depart with their loot, and garrisoning the captured towns in northern Gaul. He then stated that that this would have been the best choice, and that attacking was not good at all. So, and then after this place of trust, the Franks held the line against the cavalry, and held the line, but with rumors of Franks or actual Franks attacking the Arab loot, many of the Arab forces pulled out or broke off from the attack to protect the loot. And this looked like a retreat, so a lot of the Arab forces retreated, which turned out to be which turned into a victory for Charles Martel. And then Abdul Rahim, trying to rally the troops, was surrounded and killed. And then after this battle, the Muslims didn't return and actually left for the time. And after some serious reconnaissance by the Franks, they found that the Arabs retreated during the night. So secondly, Charles Martel ensured that Gaul would remain under Frankish rule by continuing after the Battle of Tours to push the Muslims and other nations out of Gaul. So after the Battle of Tours, Charles led his army to Bavaria, Alemannia, and to the southern duchies like Aquitaine and just the province. And he also defeated the Saxons and the Frisians. And he also denied the Islamic Empire a foothold in Europe beyond Al-Andalus and drove the Muslims back beyond the Pyrenees. But in 1736, there was another invasion by the Caliphate, and this time by sea, by a huge naval invasion. This invasion was headed by Abdul Rahim's son, and Abdul Rahim's forces landed in Narbonne and then took Arles. Martel then descended on the Arabs and retakes Arles and other places, and smashed the Muslim forces by the river Beret, and eventually defeated the seaborne Muslims using his own heavy cavalry and infantry. And Charles Martel was very brilliant in using both of these to outmaneuver and outsmart his enemy. And really, without Charles Martel heading the Frankish resistance and forces against the Islamic Caliphate, some say that Europe could have fallen under Islamic rule, as stated by Edward Gibbon, quote, "If not for Charles Martel, the Saracens would have made their way to the confines of Poland and the highlands of Scotland." And the Saracens were a group of Muslims. So finally, Charles Martel founded the Carolingian dynasty, unseating the Merovingian dynasty. So with Charles Martel firmly in power, he changed land laws to stop the erosion of his wealth base, because before Charles Martel, the actual land would get divided between heirs, and this was a self-replicating process. So a divided bit would be divided even more by that inheritor's sons. And so after the death of a Merovingian king in 1737, Charles Martel gave himself the title of Majordomus and Princeps et Dux Francorium, which means the prince and leader of the Franks. But he didn't claim the kingship after the Merovingian king died, because as Charles Owen or Oman says, quote, "He cared not for name or style so long as the real power was in his hands." And so this period between Charles Martel and or the death of the king and Charles Martel's rule became known as the interregnum, and was the final 4 years of Charles Martel's life. And he used this time to integrate surrounding realms into the Frankish church, further expanding the Frankish influence. And these final 4 years were more peaceful, with only 2 major incidents. And Charles Martel really spelled the end for the Merovingian dynasty, as no one tried to claim the throne during Charles Martel's life and even after Charles Martel's death. It was a lackluster attempt by Charles by Charles Martel's children to add legitimacy to their reign by putting Childeric III on the throne, but Childeric was stripped of his royal privileges 6 years later by the Pope, forever ending the Merovingian line. After Childeric III was gone, no other Merovingian king tried to claim the throne, therefore cementing the Carolingian line and dynasty to rule the Franks. So, while some say Charles Martel's victory at the Battle of Tours was only a minor skirmish, in fact, Charles Martel's victory was monumental, as it set a new course in medieval history and Gaul. And he did this in several ways. By defeating the Islamic invasion, he ensured that France would remain a part of Christendom. Charles Martel ensured that the Franks would become the rulers of all of Gaul. Finally, Charles Martel became the founder of the Carolingian dynasty. Thank you.